Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. It hasn't been at all spring-like in the last week. In fact, here in Berkhamsted, we had a few centimetres of slushy snow. It didn't hang around for long at all, but in some parts of central and northern Britain, there were very heavy falls indeed. They brought significant amounts of disruption. So, as we go through the next 2 weeks, does winter continue to have the upper hand, or are there indications of it turning warmer and drier? As usual, I'll start by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday the 14th. And at the outset, winter is coming back. Cold Arctic air is sweeping southwards across all parts of the UK, and there is some showery rain, sleet and snow being shown here. But watch what happens as I run the animation. It's to the southwest that we need to keep an eye on, because outbreaks of rain and stronger wind shown by the tightly packed isobars move northeastwards across all parts of the UK, and then a low pressure becomes centred close to the UK or maybe just a little bit to the west. Outbreaks of rain and showers are swirling around it, so it's a changeable or unsettled scenario into the weekend. Just running this through to its end. Further disturbances push in from the west, so more rain at times. But then towards the very end here, there are indications of colder air returning from the north once more, perhaps a risk of snow in Scotland. So lots taking place through the first week. The air temperature sequence associated with that GFS model run, the UK here is under blue shading to begin with. That indicates cold air aloft at about 1500 metres, but running this, what happens is that area of low pressure pushes up from the southwest from milder air, moves across all parts of the country, and then it really stays a low pressure dominated scene with quite mild air underneath it until the end, when that colder Arctic air begins to return southwards. What does that mean in terms of the temperatures which we can expect down at the surface? 15 GMT, Wednesday the 15th, forecast maximums. Cold really everywhere, single figures, 6 or 7s in much of England and Wales. Colder as you head northwards, but below average. Moving forwards to Friday, and the values here are actually higher than they were on Wednesday, and these are forecast minimums. So 06 GMT, Friday the 17th, a lot milder than it was earlier in the week. By this point, that southwesterly flow has pushed up across all parts of the UK. And looking at the afternoon values on Friday, 13s, 14s in much of central and eastern England. So if there's any sun around, it should feel quite pleasant by then. Going forwards to Sunday afternoon, so maximums once more, a little bit lower, but still not too bad. 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s across most of the UK. Forwards to Tuesday, and at this point, that colder air is beginning to move down from the north according to the GFS, and the minimums which have been shown here Tuesday morning, so 06 GMT, are low enough to lead to frost there in the northern half of the country. But it's still quite a lot milder in southern and central regions, in fact double figures there in the London area. So I think there is some uncertainty about what happens through the second half of the week in terms of cold air moving southwards. Therefore, it's worth taking a look at the Morgrep's G Ensemble, the UK Met Office Ensemble. This one shows forecast temperatures for the London area. And there's quite good agreement. They trend upwards through the first few days, and even by the 18th and 19th, most of those lines are quite closely packed together, suggesting a fair amount of confidence in the solutions which have been shown, because there isn't a big range of scenarios. Quite mild it looks as we go through the first week after the first couple of days, and there isn't really a signal even later on for it to turn a lot colder. Perhaps temperatures dipping a little, but there isn't a strong sign here that cold air from the north is going to reach southern parts of England. But this is the comparable chart for Inverness. In the short term, all the lines are very closely packed together, so They're showing similar solutions, a high degree of confidence in them being correct. But as early as the 16th or 17th, a huge spread opens up. And I think what that is pointing towards is just uncertainty about whether that cold Arctic air is going to be pushing down across Scotland or not, and also exactly when, if it does. So in the south, good agreement for it to often be close to average or perhaps a little bit above average in terms of the temperatures down to ground level, but head further northwards through the second half of the first week, confidence is much lower. It could well turn quite a lot colder once more, but it is not a given. Rainfall. These show forecast totals in millimetres for days 0 to 5. The chart on the left is from the ECM model, the one on the right from the GFS. Both have the wettest conditions in western parts of the UK, and that is very much to be expected because weather is coming in from the Atlantic through this period. Moving forwards to the 0 to 10 day charts, it's the same idea. Some very high totals though now being forecast in western areas, particularly by the ECM, well over 100 millimetres in northwestern England and in Wales. The GFS on the right there not showing such high values, but still significant amounts of rain in all parts of the UK if these are to be believed. So, as we head towards the end of the first week, how do the deterministic models compare to each other? This is a point where I'm looking for consistencies or inconsistencies between them to assess the level of confidence in particular outcomes. Here's the GFS, which the animation was based on, Tuesday the 21st of March. At this point, low pressure is pulling away eastwards and that colder Arctic air is beginning to return southwards. The Canadian model at the same time has low pressure to the west and there's some cold air just there getting into northern Scotland, but all in all it's quite a changeable or unsettled picture. The German icon, a little bit different because this has a northerly plunge moving down across the UK, the blue shading indicating the cold Arctic air, and it's made it a long way south if this one is to be believed. The European ECM model also has the cold air moving southwards as low pressure pulls away. Still mild there in the south and the southeast, but that cold Arctic air making inroads. And finally, the UK Met Office global model. This looks a little bit different because we've got high pressure there building up from the Azores, starting to have a little bit of influence. The green and yellow shading over the UK indicates mild air, and the cold air really just there into the far, far north, just flirting with the country at this point. There are significant differences this week, therefore, between the deterministic models. It's a very uncertain pattern towards the end of the first week. It looks as though southern and central regions at least will be under relatively mild air, but things are much less certain as you move northwards, particularly into Scotland. And that really just reinforces the message which that Mogrex G temperature chart for Inverness was showing, where there was a big spread of scenarios towards the end of week 1. So, how do things look as we head into and through week 2? As ever, it's all about using the Ensemble data to try and identify the trends and the probabilities. Here is the 16-day GEFS Ensemble plot for London. The top half of it shows air mass temperatures. The thick purple line here is the Ensemble mean. The thick black line, the 30-year average. And throughout the second week, those two lines stayed close together. But it's not that straightforward because there is a big spread of solutions which have been shown. The runs up here are pointing towards mild or very mild upper air. The ones down here, significantly colder. And the thick purple line, the ensemble mean, is generated simply by averaging them all out. So it can mask those different outcomes. On the whole, though, I don't think there is a signal really for cold conditions to develop. Just the possibility maybe at times of some colder air transiently moving across this part of the UK. Rainfall, which is shown on the bottom part of the plot, well, the spikes continue to appear through the second week in fairly large quantities. It's rather a wet scenario. Each of these individual spikes shows a forecast of rain from one of the runs in the ensemble at the given time. I say rain, but is there any chance of snow still? The snow row along the very bottom says probably not. The maximum value it can take is 33. That would be where all the runs are showing snow falling on a given day. The maximum it actually reaches is 4, so not much chance of snow in the south. That's really reflected by the 2-meter temperature data table. Forecast maximums on each of the given days for the second week are shown in these columns. The light greens are runs which are going for maximums between 6 and 10 Celsius, so close to or maybe a little bit below the average there at this time of year, most of them at least. There's also a significant amount of yellow, and that increases. Those are going for between 11 Celsius and 15 Celsius. Taking them all together, the signal is probably for temperatures to be close to or above the average for most of the second week, just for chance there of it being a little bit colder on 1 or 2 days, if this is right. Going up to Manchester, the air temperature profile is similar to the London one, but if anything, it's just a little bit lower. The ensemble mean there dipping below the thick black line by a couple of degrees. It then trends upwards later on, but it's a similar scenario. It doesn't look overly cold, but perhaps a greater chance here of colder air moving across at times. The rain profile along the bottom there, similar to London, quite a few spikes showing up. The snow row values a little bit higher, reaching a maximum of 8, but still a low chance of snow falling in Manchester. The 2-meter temperature data table, mostly light green, so the 6 to 10s, generally more dominant than they were on the London data table, so a little bit colder as you head northwards. There is some dark green there. During the early part of week 2, it's still there in significant amounts. Those are runs going for maximums between 1 and 5 Celsius, but that dark green decreases through the first few days. All in all, temperatures probably not that far from the norm. Continuing the journey northwards up to Glasgow, the air temperature profile here is a little bit different because there's a bigger negative anomaly, certainly through the first few days. Several degrees there below the 30-year norm, at least the ensemble mean is. So below average, then returning towards it later on in the period. Number of rain spikes across the bottom is similar on the whole, perhaps maybe fewer for a time there early on as it turns colder. In terms of the snow row values, those are higher, reaching 11 out of a maximum of 33. A low to moderate chance of snow falling on any one given day in this part of the UK, but nonetheless, taking over the week as a whole, there's probably a significant chance of at least a little bit of snow falling on one day or more, just relatively low on each individual one. The 2-meter temperature data table for Glasgow, lower than the Manchester one, which was lower than the London one. The dark greens making up large amounts of the columns early on. The 1 to 5 Celsius forecast maximums. There's still a little bit of blue there. Those are the ones delivering ice days. In fact, 3% just means 1 run in the ensemble. Later on, the trend is for temperatures to be climbing. The light green becomes dominant. 6 to 10 Celsius in this part of the UK will be closer to or above the average. The 10-day GEFS mean surface level pressure plot, so again generated by averaging out all of the runs, is suggesting that low pressure is going to be centred to the west of the UK. That would lead to southwesterly winds pushing up across much of the country, hence the relatively mild conditions at this point, but quite unsettled ones. The chance of colder air still feeding into the far north at times. And it's quite consistent with the comparable plot from the European ECM model. Low pressure here, centred to the west, a southwesterly feed over much of the UK. But once more, it's really important to emphasise that this is generated by averaging out all of the runs in the ensembles, whether it be the GEFS or the ECM, and it will be masking a range of possible scenarios. The general point to take away is that cold air is more likely to be pushing into the north, or the far north, milder in southern and central regions. The mean surface level pressure data table for York, so this is going forwards through time rather than being a static snapshot, and it's showing the output from all of the individual runs in the GEFS, is tentatively pointing towards pressure rising later on. The higher pressure runs are shown by the yellows and oranges. There isn't any orange there at all at the start of the second week, then it's present in small amounts, but later on, towards the end of the second week, it does become a significant number of runs, about 20 to 30% of the total, 23% actually for maximum, but certainly a growing number. On the whole, though, the signal for pressure to rise through that second week is quite a weak one. It's something which needs watching, but it could just be noise in the data, and subsequent updates may drop it because it's really not strong at the present time. But if it's correct, it would at least be suggesting an increasing chance of drier periods towards the very end of the second week. But as I say, it's just something to keep an eye on. So to summarise, week one, temperatures start below average, but it turns milder. The general theme is for it to be unsettled, with showers or longer spells of rain in all parts of the UK. Later on, through the second half of the first week, cold air may return into the north, and there is still a risk of snow at times in the northern half of the UK, particularly early on as the milder air feeds northeastwards. Rain could be preceded by some outbreaks of sleet and snow in the north, and then through the second half of the week as the colder air starts to return southwards. Week two, once more, cold conditions are most likely in the north, mild ones in the south. It's unsettled with showers or longer spells of rain really throughout the period, but there is a chance of it becoming a little bit drier towards the very end. As I mentioned, that is just something to keep an eye on as we go through the period. With colder conditions at times in the north, there is still a risk of snow there. So, there we have it. I think the key word this week is unsettled. Showers or longer spells of rain affecting all parts of the UK, temperatures fluctuating, colder conditions more likely in the north, and that leads to a possibility of snow at times, particularly over high ground in Scotland. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful and enjoyed it. If you did, then as ever, I would be most grateful if you hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thanks for watching now. Bye.